Hi, my name is Arlo Gilbert. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Osano and your host on the Privacy Insider podcast. Last week, we chatted with Keith Enright, Chief Privacy Officer at Google. This is the second part of a two-part series involving Keith. So if you haven't already listened to episode 1 of this series, go tune in now. It'll make a lot more sense. Otherwise, let's get started. So, you have an amazing perch at Google, and you have a lot of ability to influence. I'm really curious, when you think about from the position of Chief Privacy Officer at Google, has there been anything that you've been particularly proud of that you've been able to do that's had either a societal impact or something really big at Google that was internal? Really kind of whatever comes to your mind.
So the thing that I am proudest at Google is the team that I built and the people that I've managed to bring together and work with. We've had an incredible run. There are so many profoundly impactful things that we supported with the company. We've had the benefit of working for one of the most innovative and ambitious companies in the world. And just being a part of that is something that I am tremendously proud of. It is both it feeds one's ego, but at the same time, it is humbling because you recognize you have an important and a critical role, but you are a small part of a very big mission that requires a lot of really talented people working together, collaborating, mutually respecting each other, creating a wide open dialogue, and remaining optimistic and committed to building a better future for our families and our kids and for everyone. In terms of a specific project, one thing does stand out for me. In the height of the pandemic, we ended up sort of setting aside, I would say, our clear commercial interest when we recognized that we were uniquely situated to do some things around exposure notification to help governments and public health authorities deal with the spread of the COVID-19 virus. There were so many interesting stories that came through that. There were so many interesting and incredible experiences I had. We were checking in with Sundar multiple times a day. We ended up having an unprecedented collaboration with Apple, one of our primary competitors, where we both sort of set aside our differences for just a moment, recognized that neither one of us could build an effective exposure notification platform by ourselves because of the way the market was stitched together. But together we could do something incredible and save lives. So knowing that we had the support from our CEO and the senior-most leadership of the company to really lean in and focus on doing something that was just for the betterment of humanity in that moment, having the chance to reach across and work closely with my friend Jane Horvath, who was at the time the Chief Privacy Officer of Apple, who was formerly a team member of mine at Google, and to work together to make sure that not only were we building something that we knew was going to save lives, but we were doing it in a way that was privacy protective from the outset. Even though many in the health space were skeptical of the ability to do this in a privacy protective way, we faced significant pressure to build an architecture that was going to allow for the collection of information in a way that it could have been misused. But we stood firm against that as privacy leaders, and we convinced not only our internal leadership, which was easy, but we convinced the external ecosystem. We convinced governments all over the world, there's a better way to do this. And if we build it in a privacy protective way, not only are we going to prevent future abuses where people use these technologies for purposes other than the one that they're being designed for, but also we're going to build it in a way that's going to maximize the trust of people in the world right now, which was essential. We needed people to turn exposure notification on in order for it to be useful and in order for a public health benefit to be maximized. And in order for people to trust it, we needed to have a very strong narrative that was being tested by third parties and being attested to as being in fact privacy protective, that we were not collecting and sharing location information about people, and that we were designing these technologies in a way that actually protected people's privacy while also helping to save lives. It was immensely rewarding. It's something I will always carry with me as one of the highlights of my career.
That is super cool. I mean, you really got to save lives. That's amazing. So as we move on from, your origin story, we've talked a little bit about your time at Google. I think the last thing that people are dying to know is, As you watched leadership change at Google, so we had the founders as the CEOs for a long time, and then Sundar became CEO. Amazing background, brilliant person. How did that change? Did it change anything in terms of your approach to building your programs, running privacy, and you had a huge portfolio of products over which to kind of have this lens. Did things change when Sudar came on?
It's a really interesting question. I don't think the philosophy of the company changed in a meaningful way. I don't think our products changed in a meaningful way. I certainly don't think our approach to or our commitment to privacy changed. I enjoyed the same continued level of strong support from Sundar and his team as we did from Larry and his team. You feel the shadow of your leader. The personality shifts noticeably from one leader to the next. Larry, in my experience with him, he felt like a visionary, right? I mean, he was the founder leader of one of the most interesting and innovative companies in the world. You hear about the things that came from those earliest days of the founders. You hear about the ambitious philosophy to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. It was incredibly fun and exciting. I thought it was an immense privilege to be in the room with him from time to time and to hear his vision and to feel his energy, and the energy of all of those early Googlers that were they had this incredible, infectious, sincere optimism about what we were doing, and the belief that we were just a positive force for good in the world, and that we were going to make the world a better place by making these technologies available and unlocking not just information through search, but if you look at things like Android and YouTube and all of these great big bets that the company made, and the fact that we really did democratize technology in some incredible ways. We gave people access to these incredibly powerful assets and tools, largely irrespective of their geography or their economic condition. So that sensation defined my early days at Google, and I appreciated that. In some ways, that amplified under Sundar. Like what I have experienced for the last decade under Sundar has been, and this is all sort of things that he's said publicly, his background in rural India. He talks about not having had a refrigerator or a television when he was a child. And that, I think, underscores his passion for continuing on this mission and sort of leveling up this mission of making sure that these benefits of technology are equitably distributed around the world. And that's it's a message, it's a mission that you can feel really great about showing up for work every day. We have built, you look at the platforms I've already described, you look at some of our tools, you look at Docs, you look at our spreadsheet tooling, you look at all of the things that we do to make people more productive, to allow them to enjoy their lives more. And the fact that we make these available, you don't have to buy an expensive piece of hardware to enjoy the benefits of the technologies and the innovations that Google has brought to market. That's been very consistent across our leadership. So you feel the differences in personality. You feel it when you're in the room with them, and you feel it when they present to the whole company, and you feel it in the way that leadership communicates their mission. But the mission is unchanged. It's still about organizing the world's information, making it universally accessible and useful, and then watching the way that that manifests across all of our products and services. And more recently, with Sundar, we definitely see the significant amplification of the criticality of artificial intelligence for Google and for humanity generally. Google being an AI first company, making sure that we're making the right investments to get the right products out at the right time so that we can really deliver the benefits of these game-changing technologies to humanity as effectively as we can.
Well, it sounds like Google has been very successful at that mission. I know that certainly my children don't even know a world where they can't just hop online and get answers really easily. And it's funny, sometimes we chat about what it was like back in the old days, meaning the 90s, the 2000s. And, I still remember so vividly having to go to like Yahoo's directory and having to go to Alta Vista and comb through 10 million horrible results. And I remember the day that somebody was like, you should check out Google. And I went there and I was like, oh, this kind of changes everything. It's really easy to use. It's got great results. My gosh. Yeah, so you've definitely had that impact. It's a nice benefit. And it's great to hear that under Sundar that privacy continues to be top of mind. So shifting gears, I know that Google has talked about changing the privacy structure, moving to a decentralized structure from a centralized structure. I'm curious, what's your take on, the future of privacy at large organizations, and does that shift of centralization to decentralization at Google, does that foretell a world in which more companies will be decentralizing?
It's interesting. First, I would say, and this is not unique to Google, everywhere I have ever been, and I suspect everywhere I will ever be, you could plot the shift from centralized to federated on a sine wave over time. And it's not just for privacy, right? For governance and control across large distributed organizations, they tend to oscillate between creating strong centralized teams, realizing the strengths and benefits of that. And then over time, they also realize the vulnerabilities, the areas of opportunity where they could do things better. They tend to then rotate and confederate responsibility, give authority back out to some of the branch lines. And they realize some benefits from that and they swing back. I think in a healthy organization that is well led, you are seeing that sine wave still arc up and to the right. So it still moves back and forth from centralized to decentralized, but it is keeping some features over time of each of those extremes. If it over rotates dramatically in one way or the other, then it's probably going to realize an elevated risk event because they will have done something suboptimal. But if the organization is well managed and people understand what they're doing and they have some sense of internal history and they're learning over time, what ends up happening is you keep some of the benefits and features of that strong centralized organization. You have some strong central leaders. You have well-funded, capable teams, sort of centrally located. But then you also begin to distribute measured autonomy out to some of the branch lines, out to some of the business divisions, because it turns out, especially if you've got an extraordinarily diverse business like Google, sometimes having more autonomy in the business unit where you have leaders who understand the technology, the product, the challenging, the decision-making protocols better than someone who was centrally located might have understood it. It's that dialogue, the relationship between the central teams and the distributed teams being optimized that's going to produce the best long-term risk outcome. You're going to have launch velocity. You'll be able to iterate. You'll be able to move products into production, but you'll also have really good visibility and transparency into how much risk are you carrying? Where might things go wrong? Where are your areas of elevated risk? So I've seen this happen at Google over the course of the last 15 years. I've seen it happen at other organizations before and since. The other thing, as I mentioned before, is these issues, it is perilous to think about any compliance area in radical isolation. So if a company is so overly distracted by one particular risk that they are neglecting the evolution of other risks in their overall portfolio, that's going to produce a bad outcome for that business in time. This, I think, Google does quite well. So yes, we recognize privacy and data protection have been a massive priority for Google for well over a decade. We've made very substantial investments. We've built what I believe are the best teams in the world, doing this kind of work, operating this program. And yes, we have experimented with stronger centralization and with more confederation. And we continue to run those experiments and iterate the program over time, because what we're really committed to is continuous improvement, always getting better and recognizing the world is changing externally. The requirements are changing. Expectations are changing. The threat landscape is changing. We can't be static and think that we can confidently say we have it all under control. We also have to evolve. So this is part of what's happening right now. The threat landscape is not just about privacy and data protection. We have a massively complicated universe of risks that face our business. And we need to make sure that we are evolving the organization to address those risks.
Yeah, you talk about evolution, and I think about the way that privacy programs were historically set up, right? They were generally, it was, a legal person was put in charge and kind of told to solve most privacy related issues. And then they end up having to bring in and build alliances with technologists. So, CIO, CISO, development teams. I'm curious, When you think about the balance of legal control versus technologist control and the workflows internally that you have, not necessarily at Google, but kind of broadly in the world of privacy, do you think that this balance is going to evolve? I mean, you were talking about centralization and decentralization as pendulums that kind of swing from one end to the other and back. And I'm curious whether you've had any thoughts about the interactions of privacy and the teams of technology, and whether that is something that's changing. And if you think it's changing, what direction do you think it's going?
Part of the challenge here is that so much of this is context specific and cultural specific. If I surveyed 10 companies and I looked at their chief privacy officer, if they have one, I look at their CISO, I look at sort of whatever the relevant engineering or product functional lead that has responsibility for privacy and data protection, I'm going to see a tremendous amount of diversity across those companies, because the culture of the company, the way that things get done, the internal processes and protocols, I know even from our closest competitors, from a distance, it looks very, very similar. It looks like you have a CPO and you have teams beneath them, and it looks fairly analogous. If you get really close and if you talk to these people, you come to understand things happen very differently in different companies. Decisions are taken in different places. Approvals are given in different places. People have fairly radically different zones of authority and control. So when you think about the way these things are evolving, that too, it's not that there is a right way to do this and a wrong way to do this, and people are presently discovering they've been doing it wrong and they're making changes that they're doing it right. It is that the risk landscape is changing substantially, and a lot of folks are looking around to see what other companies are doing. Might someone else have discovered a superior approach? And then there's a lot of experiments happening right now. And one of the big questions, one of the things that I think will be super interesting over the next, say, 3 to 5 years is, how is the role of the chief privacy officer evolving? I think it's a mistake to be hand-wringing and say, oh no, companies are, they're doing away with chief privacy officers. That's not really the relevant question. These responsibilities aren't going away, and the teams aren't going away. How are they being reconfigured? How are leadership teams being restructured to carry these responsibilities? Because these are really smart, really sophisticated companies that are giving a lot of thought into what they want to do next and how they're going to manage these risks. And it's an incredibly fascinating time. How is the CPO's role going to evolve into something else? Are they taking on more AI governance responsibility? Are they taking more or less responsibility with more or less impact on core product strategy? Are they becoming more or less legal? Are they becoming more or less compliance? These are all really interesting questions. And I think right now, because of macroeconomic conditions, because of the catalyst for change that AI is proving to be, the challenge that's facing for a lot of organizations, from the board level, you've got boards of directors that are trying to understand the competitive landscape over the next few years. How is the technological and geopolitical landscape forcing different strategies on businesses to prevent themselves from being disrupted out of existence? All of that is going to create opportunity for people who have amassed the skills to be privacy and data protection leaders over the last 20 years. Some will be left behind if they try to just be the privacy person that they were 5 years ago. That job is not as necessary as it was. And that person, that role is not going to be as effective 3-5 years from now as it was back then. You need to evolve. Everything needs to evolve. It's not about the title. It's about stitching together the right assets, the right responsibilities, the right social graph inside of the organization you're in to deliver real value, to solve hard problems, and to execute your business strategy in a responsible way. I think that's where we're headed. And the great people are the ones who will understand that and will seize that opportunity and just have an incredible runway for this next stretch.
Fantastic insights. Thank you, Keith. So when you think about the nuts and bolts of building privacy programs, we think about the different kinds of things that privacy professionals have to do. So, you think in the early days, it was all about get up a cookie consent banner and a privacy policy, right? Those were kind of the two things you could do that, checked the box and showed that you were working on building and complying and being a good steward of consumer data. I'm curious, as time has gone on, have you seen a shift in terms of the focus of privacy teams? Meaning, are they still focused on solving those kind of two core problems of the nuts and bolts, or are they shifting gears and looking at AI? Are they building in, data mapping tools? Are they, ROPAs? And I mean, there's so much to do when you think about privacy. I'm curious where you think the primary focus for privacy teams is going to be over the next, call it 18 months, specifically in relation to the operational tooling and outputs that they're expected to produce.
We'll zoom out for a second. I would say if you look over the evolution of the privacy professional generally over the last 20 years, early on, the first generation of CPOs, they were all over the place. You had people in HR, you had people in marketing, you had people with legal backgrounds. It was an experimental role because a lot of companies felt like from a branding perspective, they needed to be able to say they had somebody looking after privacy. And it was just sort of a free for all. People were identifying all kinds of folks. As you look at, say, the last decade, the law was maturing. You had laws like the GDPR in Europe that made this a board level consideration. And there was, I think, a very clear sense in many organizations, there are new legal requirements coming in that we need to be able to digest, interpret, and operationalize. That resulted in a concentration of senior titles, head of privacy, chief privacy officer, what have you, who were generally lawyers because they were able to interface with outside counsel, inside counsel, digest these legal requirements, translate them into operational, actionable advice inside of the organization that could then be reflected in product strategy to get things done. Over the course of the last few years, I would say post 2018, we have begun to see the metamorphosis of the lawyer CPO into something else. And that is many of the things I've talked about, new adjacent bodies of legal and regulatory requirements, including DMA, DSA, new state law requirements in the US, all of these kinds of changes, suggesting we're going to see continued complexity in the legal requirements inbound that we need a programmatic solution for. But you are also seeing an evolution in privacy technology and compliance technology. There are so many dashboards available right now. There are so many tools coming onto market saying we can help you understand your current risk posture, which will help you prioritize your investments and intelligently manage risk going forward. So now it's not just the lawyer. You now need someone who can fundamentally lead like a project management office, who can synthesize all these technologies, who can interface with the CISO, with the CTO, with the CIO, can help senior execs understand this is the universe of legal requirements we are facing. These are the third-party tools that are available to us. These are the kinds of service augmentations we may need from third parties because it's more efficient for us to tag them in from somebody else than to try to build all these competencies internally. It is looking more like a traditional senior management function that is multidisciplinary. Yes, you need to be able to understand the law, but you also need to be able to weigh the shifting equities and communicate with all of these different stakeholders at the senior-most levels of the company. These are the trade-offs that we need to make. These are the risks we're going to carry. And this is how I can give an appropriate level of assurance to my C-suite, to my board. We're doing this responsibly. We are competing effectively. We're carrying a responsible level of risk so that we can move appropriately quickly, given the rate of technological change and the competition that we're seeing from others in the ecosystem. But we're doing it in a sustainable way. And I can lead an organization that has all of the subordinate skill sets. I can have technologists that can make sure that I have automated controls in place that are performing appropriately, that are giving me real-time updates as to the kinds of risks that I'm carrying. I have lawyers, or I can interact with my legal organization so that as the law changes, if we face a legal challenge, I am integrating that information, that perspective, and I'm using it to weigh and adjust my overall strategy. I have public policy people. I have communications people. I have user experience people. I am now truly, this was always part of the CPO's life, but now to be a true senior executive, to be a C-suite participant in these conversations, this role is going to have to level up. And it's no longer just about privacy. It's about AI governance. It's about leveraging risk. It's about thinking about compliance more holistically. And it's about enabling your product people and your business people to close deals and keep moving in a way that is responsible and predictable so your business can grow.
Growth and change. Those sound like common themes across the chief privacy officer role. So speaking of change and evolution, I have read that you are going to be embarking on a new journey and parting ways with Google as an employee. What's next? I mean, imagine a guy like you can go write his own ticket. What do you want to do with your days, and how are you gonna spend those days?
I cannot overstate how grateful I am for the opportunities that I've had. First and foremost, Google, it is such an incredible company. It's such an incredible team. I woke up most days for the last 14 years feeling like I won the lottery. And it was a very, very difficult decision for me that it was time to move on. But there were certain features, right? Like first, my team was ready for me to go, to be honest. I had the benefit of standing on the shoulders of immensely capable people, who were smarter than me, more capable than me, and they were just ready. They were ready for next. So sometimes I do think as a senior leader in an organization, you need to have the self-awareness to know it's a responsible thing to create some oxygen for the rest of your team, and let other people step up and take bigger responsibilities. That was part of my thinking. Also, there are features in the world right now that look an awful lot to me like the things that drew me to privacy back in 1999, 2000, but in many ways are even more exciting to me. When I look at what is happening with artificial intelligence, when I see the potential disruption, when I see the potential for these technologies to really do dramatic things to improve the human condition, to make the world safer, and to improve public health outcomes and do other things to just deliver incredible value for society. And then when I think about the skills and abilities and experiences and relationships that I've built over my time at Google and in the roles I had before Google, I felt like this is the moment for me to take the things that I've learned and the things that I've done and try to figure out how I can scale that impact in an area beyond privacy, beyond data protection. So a lot of interesting opportunities. I'm super excited. I continue to serve on the board of directors of ZoomInfo, which is an incredible experience. I have a ton of faith in the team over there. It's been very educational for me to have a broader governance role. There, I sit on the audit committee. I chair the privacy, security, technology committee. So I've got oversight over cyber and data and other areas that are sort of, again, more broad than traditional privacy and data protection. I also, looking at other board service roles, I sit on the board of directors of a nonprofit called Decode, which is it's a collaborative effort with the student organizations of both Berkeley and Stanford focused on promoting entrepreneurship. So really excited about that. That work really activates me. I do a lot of work with venture capital and private equity, helping them understand the opportunity space for artificial intelligence, data protection, cyber and security. So it is an incredibly exciting moment. I have deeply mixed feelings about stepping away from Google just because I love the company and I love the people so much, but I am supremely confident they are going to do great things without me. And I'm excited to mix it up. I'm excited to do something new.
Well, you seem like a guy who always lands on his feet. So I am really excited to stay in touch and see what you come up with next. So last question, I would love to hear from you. What do you do in privacy in your own personal life that you aren't proud of? So for example, I am very quick to just type in my email on basically anything and give it away. I don't read the terms and conditions the vast majority of the time. Do you have any guilty confessions for our audience?
I wouldn't say I'm not proud of it, because I work very hard to never do things that I'm ashamed of. I think that's sort of a pretty good baseline rule to navigate your life. But I would say one of the things that probably raises people's eyebrows when they get to know me is I do tend to collect a massive amount of data about myself. Health data, for example. I do regular voluntary blood screening using third-party services because I'm really interested in sort of how my core health metrics and biomarkers are changing over time. I wear I wear devices that are tracking health metrics all the time. I'm really interested in how my sleep is affected by different behaviors. I do cold plunges regularly. I'm really interested in sort of how different experiments that I sort of run on myself, safe to fail experiments, affect my health. I am obsessed with optimizing my well-being, my performance, and my health. I have aging parents, my family. I want to make sure that I am being responsible for my loved ones and doing everything I can to stick around as long as I can, and realize the benefits of taking care of myself for as long as I possibly can with a really extended health span. But all of that involves data, right? So for me, I guess that tying it back to your question, the thing that is surprising, I take privacy very, very seriously. I think about privacy in almost everything I do over the course of my day, but I don't resist data collection. I am very, very committed to collecting a ton of data that some would even say is highly sensitive data, because I actually think there's extraordinarily valuable insights, at least interesting insights for me in that. But that might surprise people who perceive me as more of a privacy zealot.
Yeah, I think that people who are not in privacy always assume that if you are in privacy, you must be a tinfoil hat wearing weirdo, right? And we certainly try to dispel that myth. And that's one of the reasons we love to get feedback from our guests on what do they do in their real lives. Keith, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been an amazing pleasure learning about your journey at Google through decades of running privacy teams, and now off to do exciting new things we'll be watching. And I hope that we'll have you back on the show at some point in time in the future. Thanks for joining.
I look forward to it. Yeah, so much fun. Thanks for having me. I look forward to doing it again sometime.
All right. Have a great day, everybody, and tune in for our next episode in about a month. We have a very exciting surprise guest. Let's just say I think you're going to find this next guest opinionated. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Privacy Insider Podcast. You can find a full transcript of this episode and any show notes at osano.com. That's www.osano.com. And while you're there, get access to an excerpt of my book, The Privacy Insider: How to Embrace Data Privacy and Join the Next Wave of Trusted Brands, which is now available on Amazon for purchase. Until next month, take care. And remember, data privacy is a fundamental human right, y'all.